Tensions continue to escalate between Iran and Israel, with both countries defending their right to strike. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates is currently mopping up after floods in Dubai last week left parts of the city submerged. This is just some of the international news dominating the headlines, and to unpack some of the issues, I'm joined by Aaliyah Vayez, an international relations analyst. Aaliyah, appreciate your time this afternoon. Now let's talk about the unprecedented floods in Dubai, which came as a shock to many. How might such natural disasters impact Dubai's reputation as a global business and tourism hub?
Thank you so much for having me. I think, first of all, it definitely shocked all the residents of Dubai, as well as its government. I think the entire city came to a standstill, and as an economic hub, as well as the host of the second largest airport in the world, it definitely took a giant hit. Financially, as well as the rest of the region was put to a standstill. I think the government has done its best to kind of mop up or so-called vacuum up the floods that caused immense damage to infrastructure, as well as disruption to lifestyle, to economy, to the number of flights that come in and out of Dubai, not only in transit or to land in Dubai, but also naturally in transit to the rest of to the region, to Europe, to the Americas, and as well as to Asia. So I think this is a giant lesson for the government in what is called cloud seeding, to kind of regulate the rain, to regulate the climate, to regulate the temperature in that city, but to also to come up with a proper drainage system, which is of course immensely important when kind of experimenting with climate kind of temperatures.
Now, one of the things that we often talk about in times of disasters is a state of readiness. Just how prepared were the officials in Dubai to deal with this catastrophe?
I would say not at all entirely. I think not only in terms of a well-functioning drainage system, but also disaster relief, when it comes to floods specifically. I mean, we had horrible visuals all over social media as well as general media about cars floating, infrastructure being completely taken down, malls, airports, etc., hotels. Of course, the tourism industry was immensely affected, and I think in turn, the government was not prepared for how, to the extent to which industries well beyond just general infrastructure was affected. So the airport was entirely not prepared for something like this to have taken place. So I think on an immediate readiness, they were not at all prepared. But I think this is a big lesson going forward in terms of how to better their early warning systems, as well as their overall disaster readiness mechanisms.
Well, let's focus a little and look at the UK's travel warning for South Africa. How do such advisories affect diplomatic relations between countries? Can they lead to misunderstandings or tensions, especially when there's a discrepancy in perception between the issuing country and the affected nation? And I suppose the big part to that is, does that country issuing this notice, is that country obliged to show evidence of the information or intelligence that they have?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, 100%, it definitely affects diplomatic relations between countries, because, the UK issues travel alerts on a regular routine basis. That is not in question here. However, when you issue something that, uses strong security language like terrorism, like danger, advising, its travelers, as well as travelers all around the world, because we all use these travel alerts as guidance when going to and from countries. It definitely affects not only diplomatic relations in the sense that South African, DIRCO, our Department of International Relations and Cooperation, were not only confused by this, but were also, somewhat frustrated and a little bit, I would say, I would go so far as to say a bit angry, because not only was this kind of unfounded, there were no signs of evidence for these claims of terrorism, for high danger, etc., to be made, but also it impacts our economy. We'd seen the rand drop. We'd seen, it definitely affects tourism levels, because people second guess whether they should come to South Africa, whether they should spend money in South Africa, whether they should invest in South Africa. So economically, so the impact goes beyond just diplomatically. It definitely filters down to the economy, to investment. I think a country making that, to answer the second part of your question, a country making that or advancing that alert doesn't necessarily, there's no, for example, legislation or regulation that says that a country does need to give sort of evidence behind these travel alerts or these alerts generally. But I think, South Africa and the UK have historically great relations diplomatically, economically, politically. So I think it was well within DIRCO's, for example, DIRCO Representative Zane Dangore's rights to ask for some sort of proof, for some sort of evidence as to why this alert was given. And no, we haven't received any update on that. But I think, because of the ripple down effect that I have mentioned politically, economically, diplomatically, we deserve some sort of evidence.
Can international nations use this sort of misinformation, if you will, as a means of upsetting the other country, if you will, or upsetting the apple cart? Because on October 29 last year, in fact 2022, the US government said it had received information on that terrorists may be planning an attack targeting large gatherings in South Africa, but there was no such event post that announcement. So this is another situation where that notice is given, and for all intents and purposes, there may not be an attack of any sorts or anything that is imminent.
100%. And, this happens often when a country is truly, well within its rights to exercise caution for its nationals traveling to and from, a different country for whatever reason, whether it's tourism, whether it's business, etc. And I think that's all, South Africa and DIRCO, we don't take fault with that. It's the fact that, especially for a country that is not a first, quote unquote, first world country or a country of, within the West, where we can take chances with our economy, we can take chances diplomatically. We need to know why a travel alert like this was issued, because as I stated before, this has immense impact on our more than just political or diplomatic relations with, for example, the UK, but it definitely signals to the rest of the world that maybe you shouldn't come to South Africa, you shouldn't invest in South Africa, and that of course has an immensely negative impact on our economy, which we don't have, the luxury of wiggle room, for lack of a better phrasing. We can't take chances. So we'd like to know where the risk is coming from. So we ourselves, on a domestic level, can manage the risk in the best way we know how.
So let's shuffle across to Iran, where the foreign minister of that country downplayed an overnight drone attack and mentioned ongoing investigations. How might such incidents impact regional stability, particularly in light of heightened tensions between Iran and Israel?
I think, when we talk about regional stability, it's not just, this kind of scuffle that's happened between Iran and Israel, but of course, everything that's happening, in occupied Palestinian territories, specifically Gaza and the West Bank. So definitely, I think what we've seen is, in the space of a week or just over a week, I would say, immensely heightened tensions between Iran and Israel, where the world is kind of watching if retaliation happens and to what degree. And I think, if Israel does claim responsibility for this kind of retaliatory act in the Isfahan province of Iran, it's not characteristic of what how Israel retaliates. No lives were lost, no infrastructure was damaged. It wasn't as big as we would have, as the world would have, expected Israel to retaliate. And again, the investigation is ongoing, but of course, it is well within Iran's character to downplay any kind of retaliation on itself, simply because it doesn't want to admit to any kind of large-scale damage, because it doesn't want to, admit to the power Israel has, on a technological force, on a technological front, on a military front. But I think to be honest, I think the tension between the two of them is heightened, but we won't see any more kind of attacks coming from either one of them, because simply it's not within their interest to wage a full-scale war, to admit or give into that level of regional instability, because we all know it will be, the region will be unstable. It's not a question, and I think Israel's facing a lot of military threats on all of its borders. So it's got its hands full, and I think it achieved what it wanted to by striking the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, by deflecting attention off of Gaza. And I think the world's attention, rightfully so, is back to the genocide Israel is waging on the Gaza Strip.
Well, finally, let's look at tension in the United States, and this comes as the Republicans' internal divisions over military support for Ukraine have become highly visible in Congress. How might this infighting affect the party's political standing and influence its foreign policy decisions in the future, particularly in this election year?
Oh, I think it's done exactly what the world is expected it to do, as well as domestically. I think the Democratic majority in the House definitely supported a larger aid package towards Ukraine, towards Israel, towards Taiwan. I think it was a matter of time before this was brought to a House vote, given that they called for the House vote a few months earlier, I think 2 months earlier. I think what is more interesting coming out of this development is the fact that the Republican Party was almost evenly split as to those who voted in favor of this aid package and those that didn't. I think those that didn't definitely drew attention towards the fact that they believe a huge amount of funds like this could be directed to better uses domestically, as well as many Republicans have thought that European countries such as Germany, such as France, should be doing more for Ukraine, more for a country that the European Union has made such big claims over. And I think it's also directed attention towards the fact that more accountability should be accountability mechanism should be in place for aid packages as big as this. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars. Israel was given $23 billion in aid. And I think, again, that this is very much in line with the United States stance towards Israel. It's unequivocal support towards Israel and its right to self-defense, and of course its attacks against retaliation against Hamas. So I think this is well within the United States' remit, and it's well within its foreign policy, especially in election year. I think this could win a lot of points domestically.